We go just one block over, and it looks like a bomb has gone off. There were trees down, there were houses missing, there were vehicles flipped upside down. Hey everybody, Doc Brian here, and welcome to Doc Talks. We're broadcasting today from LifeWord Studios in Conway, Arkansas, broadcasting in 127 countries and over 160 languages to a potential listening audience of 2 billion people. You can find all of our content at lifeword.org. That's lifeword.org. Today, we're going to do something just a little bit different. Yesterday, March the 31st, was the 2-year anniversary of the tornado that came through the Little Rock metro area. And during that mass destruction, our church was a catastrophic loss of our building. Now, I want to just tell you the story about the day that happened. It was on a Friday afternoon. And on Friday afternoons, I typically see people that I counsel with through the means of telehealth. And so I had several appointments for that afternoon, and I remember getting a text from North Little Rock Schools that said they were dismissing school due to the high risk of potential tornadoes. Now, being an 80s kid growing up in school, we weren't let out for those kind of things. You know, we had tornado drills, and we went to the hallway and just put our head between our legs and hope for the best. And so I can say that I was just a little bit perturbed that they were letting school out. Now, my wife was working that day. She works at the hospital there in North Little Rock. And so I had to go pick up our son. And so I decided that I would pick him up, I would bring him back to the office and give him an iPad or have him work on his homework or something so that he could keep himself entertained while I tended to the people that I needed to have meetings with. And so I remember I get out of the church in the parking lot, and just as soon as I get out of the parking lot, this car cuts me off and I rear end them. Now, we may have been going 15 to 20 miles an hour. I mean, it was not a high impact sort of thing. I get out and I look, there's no damage to my vehicle. There's no damage to the other party's vehicle. And so I go up to check on this individual, and they said, "You hit me really hard." And I said, "Well, okay, are you okay?" And they said, "You hit me really hard." And so I said, well, the only reasonable thing to do at this point is to call the police for there to be an incident report. Well, this was right at the point where North Little Rock was switching over to civilian accident reporting. So instead of sending a police officer to do the accident report, they had a civilian that did that. And so this was still in a time of transition, and it took a while for them to not just respond, but to take the report. We sat there for at least an hour while this person took the report. Now, during that time, my wife left work, picked up my son, took him back to the hospital, and we had arranged that when I was finally free from this accident report, that I would go to the hospital and pick him up. By the time all of that transpired, the most of my meetings that I had that afternoon were over. I had to cancel them. And so I decided I would go pick up my son. We would just go home. So I get him and we get home, and we weren't home maybe 5 to 10 minutes when the tornado sirens began to sound in North Little Rock. And so I turned on my phone, Todd Yacobian, and was listening to the reports, and he said there was a tornado on the ground in Little Rock. And, you know, we have lived in we have lived in Arkansas the majority of our lives, and those of you who have know that we're kind of desensitized to the tornado watches or warnings because so many times there have been warnings and nothing has happened, or they may just stir up a little bit of dust. And so the typical Arkansan, if you will, I think I could say this with pretty good basis, The typical Arkansan, when a tornado warning comes out, they go get on the porch and they start looking for this tornado. Well, as time rolled on, the weather people announced that this tornado was crossing into North Little Rock. Now, if you know anything about North Little Rock, it is a very wide city. And so as they are saying it's passing over into North Little Rock, that could mean so many different things. And so I began to look, and it appears that this is going to cross the Arkansas River and come into Burns Park, which is fairly close to where we live. So I got my son Luke. I said, hey, we need to get in the hallway just in case there's a tornado coming. And so we get blankets and pillows and we throw them in the hallway, and we get our 3 dogs and get them in the hallway. And I'm still watching on my phone. And I remember one of the most poignant moments of that was Luke text, which Luke would have been 7 years old. He texted his Meemaw and his Nana and said, there's a tornado coming for us, please pray. Now, of course, what that incurred was they began to call my phone, and I'm trying to watch the weather to see what's going on. And so we see on the radar that the tornado has crossed over crossed over the Arkansas River, is now crossing over Interstate 40. And so I say, okay, we don't know what's going to happen here, but we're going to pay attention now. We're going to make sure that we're safe. And just as I said that, the lights in the house flickered, and of all things, the air conditioner kicked on. The return air vent was right there in front of our face. And so during the height of what would have been the tornado, we couldn't hear anything outside. We just heard the air blowing through that air conditioning unit. And so I remember they gave the all clear for North Little Rock. And so as I look at my phone, then I see that I've missed calls from the security alarm system at the church and the fire alarm system at the church. And so I told Luke, I said, hey, we need to go down to the church and see what's going on. The security alarm's gone off. And, I thought maybe a door was pulled open or, something very minor may have taken place. But we needed to go check on it. And as we get out in our front yard, all that we see is our trash can is blown into the front yard. And I'm thinking, here we are again. This tornado has caused just mass devastation. And I remember we get down at the end of our street and we make a right-hand turn and we go just one block over, and it looks like a bomb has gone off. I mean, there were trees down, there were houses missing, there were roofs off of vehicles or off of houses. There were vehicles flipped upside down. There was down power lines. There was trees down. And I remember just in that moment saying, thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus, for your protection. And I just began to weep about what has transpired here. And I just remember thinking, God, thank you so much for your protection. And so we make our way down to the church. We have to drive over some things. And I can still today in living color in my mind remember what that looked like. Complete devastation. The rear of the church had been picked up and the metal was twisted. I lived in North Carolina for 5 or 6 years, and I've witnessed many hurricane and how they would mangle homes. But I've never seen anything quite like this. And so then I began to think, hey, there are my church people that live just right here. And so just next to the church, we had, there was an apartment complex for 62-year and older persons. And we had 3 church members that lived there. And I thought, we've got to get over there and we've got to check on them. And I looked just straight over, and where one of them lives, the roof was gone. And so we got in my truck and we went around and had to go over some curbs and drive through some grass. But we got to this first person, And as I get into his home, he's sitting in his recliner, and I say, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And he goes, "Yes. Can you just make my fire alarm quit going off?" And so I disconnect his fire alarm. He's in about 2 inches of water in his apartment. And he said, I'll be okay. You need to go check on the other two that live there. And I did. The next lady, her roof was gone, but she was okay. And then the next lady in the same apartment complex, just right up from them, there was absolutely no damage. And it is absolutely remarkable of how a tornado can come through an area, mangle one house, and the house right next to it be virtually untouched. And so as I get back to the church, I begin to think about, where do we go from here? What's next? And I remember calling a few pastor friends and saying, "Hey, we've been hit by the tornado. I need you to pray that God would give me wisdom, pray that we would know how to proceed." And I said all of this to bring us to the point today on the show to talk about crisis intervention. Now, as pastors, as Christians, as parents, as friends, we are going to be called to respond to crises. And not only are they major things that we would see as immediately recognized as some kind of crisis, they may be simple things that are a crisis to those that have experienced it. For instance, when my son has a bicycle wreck and scrapes his knees, or he falls and hurts himself, it is a crisis to him. And I have to respond to that crisis in an appropriate manner. Now, we all know that when a child gets hurt, your level of action depends a lot on their level of emotion. So if you run to a child and say, "Oh, my poor little sweet baby, are you okay? Are you okay? Oh my goodness, you're hurt, you're hurt." They're going to be more and more apt to be emotional because they're unaware of what's actually happening. But if you enter in with a calm voice, a calm presence, then you're going to de-escalate what's going on. Now, I look at crisis intervention at the 3 L's. We look, we listen, and then we link. So the first thing let's talk about here, we look. The very first thing that we need to do in any type of crisis is we need to look to make sure that we're safe. Are we safe? Now, as I responded to the tornado of that crisis, there were tree limbs down, there was power lines down, there was, at the church, the gas meter was completely gone, so there was gas just shooting up, and you could smell it in the air. And so while we still want to respond, we've got to make sure that we are safe, or else there will be a secondary crisis. Now, there are some exclusions to this. For instance, if you see someone who's drowning and you're an adequate swimmer, you know that you can get to them and you can save them, then you jump into the water. However, you can look at scenes and news reports. We just, here a year or two ago, one of our high school football coaches, who was a former Arkansas Razorback, drowned while attempting to save someone who was drowning. And he was an adequate swimmer. You've got to make sure that you are safe in how you respond. Now, of course, if you don't know how to swim, you probably shouldn't be out there trying to save someone from drowning. And so there are exclusions to this rule. What I would say is that we need to be very hesitant responding to a situation that we have no training to respond to. We may respond to someone who may be in the act of, or who have committed suicide. We need to make sure that we enter into that with a very mindfulness of safety. So However you respond to that, you need to look around, you need to make sure that you're safe. Now, the second thing that we do within the look stage is that we look for people with obvious, urgent, basic needs. Obvious, urgent, basic needs. These may be people who are bleeding. These may be people who are seriously injured. Now, the response to that may be as simple as we call 911, which probably should be the first thing we do anyway in any type of major crisis situation. But it maybe go farther that we get them some water, or we get them some bandages, or however we respond to this situation, we look at the one with the most urgent basic need first. Now, depending upon your level of training and experience, it may be that you are just the reporter, that you are a good witness as to what has taken place. And so we're looking at crisis intervention today, but there is just a broad spectrum of what crisis may be. Now, we also have to be careful again that we realize that not everything that we may view as an incident may actually be a crisis, because our perspective as to what is taking place is different depending upon our experiences in life. So we look for the ones with the most urgent basic needs, and then we check for people with serious distress reactions. Now, I think back to a time of where I, as a pastor, responded to a church member who had to use deadly force against someone who was attacking them. It turned out to be completely justified. But as responding to them, the person that did the shooting was very calm, was very collected, was very cognizant of what had just happened. However, his mother was not. She was wailing, she was crying, she was mad, she was all the plethora of emotion that you could think of. She was the one. Now, she was not a witness to what had taken place. She was not an active part of what had taken place, but she was in the one with the most serious distressed reaction. And that's when we go to that person. And sometimes it's as simple as us being present in that moment of being there. Now, one key thing that I would tell you is that in these situations, what you should not do is tell them to calm down, tell them to be quiet, tell them that they're overreacting. Those kind of things are not going to help. They're going to escalate whatever is going on. Now, as I said, sometimes it's your simple presence that helps them, that they just know that you're there. One thing that I have found helpful is that you tell this person in distress that, hey, however you're feeling, it's okay to feel that way. If you're experiencing anger, it's okay to feel anger. If you're experiencing distress, if you're experiencing anxiety, if you're experiencing just complete and total loss or devastation, it's okay. But know that we're not going to live in this forever, that we will get through this, and we will get through this together. Let them know that they're not alone. Now, in these situations, it may be that they need you to react with kindness. It may be that they need you to react with compassion. But depending on how well you know these people, sometimes it's that you need to respond to them with a very realistic point of view as to what just happened. That you need to walk them through of this is what took place, and this is how we are going to respond. So that's our look. We check for safety. We check for the person with the most urgent basic needs. And then we look for the person who has the most serious distress reaction. And that brings us to the second part. We have look, and then we have listen. It's very important for us to listen to what people are saying when they're in the middle of distress. So we approach people who may need support. Now, not everybody is going to look like they need your support, But it's important for us to look around to see who has had catastrophic loss, who is standing by themselves, who are the people that seem like they are composed when they shouldn't be. We look around for these people who may need support. And again, it may be as simple as being beside them, of saying, hey, I know that that's your house, or I know that's your child, or I know that's whatever. It may be just as simple as asking, is there anything that I can do for you? Is there anything that I can provide? And so we have this looking for these people who need our support, but then we ask about people's needs, and we ask about their concerns. And we have to genuinely listen. And I've said this before, but I think one of the biggest problems in America today, when it involves communication, is that we listen to respond instead of listening to understand. You see, a lot of times in crisis situations, what people say isn't what they really mean. And so you kind of have to read between the lines, if you will. Kind of like, I give this example, and it's kind of a silly example. If my wife comes to me and she says, honey, I'm out of gas. Now, what she communicated to me, what she said was, I'm out of gas. But what she communicated was, I need you to go get me some gas. And so while that's a very basic and silly kind of example, that's exactly what it is sometimes that people who are in crisis, how they respond when we ask if they have a need or if they have a concern. And so we've got to really listen as to what they're trying to say. What are they communicating? Not what are they saying, what are they communicating? And if you don't know that person very well, it's sometimes very difficult to do that. And so from a psychological point of view, let's see, what are they asking for? They say, well, I don't know where I'm going to stay. I don't have any clothes. I need to call so-and-so. I need to do this, this, and this. In responding to the tornado, I had a lady who said, my electric's going to get cut off today if I don't go pay my electric bill. And their roof was missing. They weren't going to have electric anyway. But I listened to the need and to the concern and said, hey, look, I think we'll be okay. If you really need to pay that, then I can take you to get that paid. But there may be other things that we need to focus on today. And listen to what they're communicating. Now, there are some people that when they are in the middle of a crisis, they think completely irrational. And so you have to listen to people to help them feel calm. You have to be the voice of reason and calm in the storm. Again, don't tell them to calm down. Don't tell them to be calm, or to be quiet, or to just listen. Those things are very unhelpful. Ask them to tell you what they need, but for you to be calm and reasonable. If you need to pay that electric bill today, we will make sure that it gets paid. If you need a place to stay, we're going to make sure that you have a place to stay. If you need clothes, we're going to make sure that you have clothes. And so we have the look, we have the listen, then we have the link. We need to help people to address the basic needs and access the services that are available. Now, when you are within the first 20 minutes of a crisis of such magnitude, such as a tornado, you may not have immediate access to these needs or organizations who would provide these needs. Now, of course, like if a house burns down, that of course is a crisis for the family, but there are the Red Cross, people who will respond in those times of need. It may be that your church has set up a benevolence fund of where you're able to get them in touch with the pastor or one of the deacons or somebody in the church that can help them in that time of need. It may be that there is a hotline that they call and you assist them in doing that. It may be that they have to go somewhere and apply for something and you assist them in doing that. It's very important, I think, for us as Christians to have a list of resources. I know that at our church, we have a document that lists all the food pantries, all the closed pantries, if you will, resources to help pay for utilities, resources to help you with, you know, homelessness, shelters, domestic violence shelters, all of these things. We have a list of resources. And so in these very basic crisis where it's not a mass crisis, it may be that you're able to get them assistance almost immediately if you have those resources written down somewhere. And I think it's very important for us as individuals to have a list of those people. I think it's important for us to have built communities that we know certain contractors, or we know, plumbers, electricians, builders, remodelers, that we have as Christians in a community, that we have those resources that we can provide to them. And so we want to help people with basic needs to access these resources, but we also want to help people cope with the problem. Now, let's think about the problem of the crisis that this family member has lost someone to suicide. Now, that may be one of the most difficult aspects to approach as a crisis, because you don't have all the answers. You may never know the answers. You may never know the why of what took place. But these people are here in the middle of this crisis. And so you need to help them cope with the problem. And sometimes, again, that's simply just being present. That's listening to what they have to say. It's not always about having the right thing to say as much as having the ability to actually listen to what they are telling you. Now, I would tell you that I don't have all the answers, and you won't have all the answers. But the most basic need in time of loss is your presence. Now, it may be that they respond differently. You may need to take food. It may be that you just go to their house and look and say, hey, they need their laundry done, and you do their laundry. You may say, hey, your laundry needs to be done. I'm going to go do it for you. And they may discourage you, or maybe their dishes need to be done, or their house needs to be cleaned. You just go do those things. They're certainly not going to say on the phone or in person, hey, could you go do my dishes? Could you help me with laundry? You've got to help them cope in a way that's healthy for them, but you've got to be able to give them an environment to cope in. There are many times that we say to people, hey, I'll be praying for you. And we genuinely pray for them. But sometimes we need to put feet to our faith, if you will, and just simply be there for them and help them in what may be their greatest time of need in their entire life. And I assure you that that is what Christ would have us to do in these situations, is that we walk with them. The scripture says we don't have to bear our burdens alone. Not only do we have Christ, but we have our brothers and sisters in Christ that we can lean upon. And so we look and we link and we help people cope with their problems. So we give them information, whatever that information may be. If it's, someone who has been in a car wreck and that is their crisis, we give them information. Hey, you need to call your insurance company. You need to let them know what's going on. It may be as simple as saying, hey, you need to call the police to have an investigation or an accident report given, or when you go to the hospital or the ER, they're going to ask you about whether or not this was a motor vehicle accident. And if it is, then there's going to be this paperwork you're going to have to fill out. And I can assist you in that, or I can get a social worker or someone to assist you in that. All of us have dealt with situations in our life of where we had to do it as a learning process. But I firmly believe that the trials and situations that we deal with in life prepare us to help other people. And so we should be active in helping them cope, giving them information. And then we need to connect them with people, connect people with their loved ones and social support. Sometimes it's just as simple as letting them use your phone to make a call, or you calling someone. Maybe you know a particular person in the church that they're closest to. Maybe it's that you need to call that person to give them some social support. Maybe it's that you call one of their family members and say, hey, this is going on. We need you to, help us, help them. That can be a very difficult situation because you don't want that person to feel like you've passed them off. But you let them know that you are still with them, you're still walking with them in this, but you want them to have the most support that you could possibly provide. So in crisis intervention, we look, we listen, we link. And so we will deal with many crises in our life. And we may appear that some of these we don't even see as crisis, but we have to remember that everyone's perspective is different. How we view things is different. There was this analogy given once that a minor surgery on you, the same surgery is a major surgery for me. Our perspective is completely different. But if we look around, if we listen, and we provide resources and link together, we can do the best to help each other. Glad that you're here with us today. Thank you for listening. Again, we're on lifeword.org. You can find all the Christian content there. You can find me at thedocbrian.com. Find all of my social media links there. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope this has been helpful to you. Have a great day. We'll see you soon.